I'm Torisaur, and today I'm going to be sharing my own version of the Shredder from my personal iteration of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles called TMNT Genesis. I normally put these at the end of my character rankings, but this one's gonna be a bit long, which is why I decided to make it a separate video. So if you haven't seen my Shredder ranking, definitely go check that out and then come back here. Generally speaking, Genesis Shredder is what happens when you put 1987, 2003, and 2012 Shredder into a blender, which on paper sounds like it would be an absolute disaster, but I actually think it makes a really fascinating character. When making this AU, I knew that I wanted Oroku Saki to be a genuinely good person that was corrupted by grief and eventually finds redemption. Now I can already hear y'all lighting torches and sharpening your pitchforks. Shredder needs to be an irredeemable villain. He needs to be a monstrous threat against the Turtles and Splinter and hate them forever. I'm gonna need y'all to trust me because you will get both of those things in maybe an unexpected way, but I think you'll like it. Before we get to that though, I gotta run y'all through the backstory. I explained this a little bit more thoroughly in my Splinter video, but here's a quick recap of where Hamato Yoshi and Oroku Saki's story begins. So in Japan, there are three ninja clans of note: the Oroku clan, the Hamato clan, and the Foot clan. Oroku Saki's dad is the leader of the Oroku clan, and the Hamato and Foot clans are sworn enemies, which results in the Hamatos being eradicated by the Foot, with Hamato Yoshi being the lone survivor. Yoshi is then taken in by the Oroku clan. Yoshi and Saki pretty instantly become best friends. They are not brothers, but Yoshi definitely sees Saki as such. Tang Shen is from the Foot clan, and she and Yoshi have a Romeo and Juliet type forbidden romance, since the Foot and Hamato clans were sworn enemies and the Foot absolutely fucked up the Hamatos. Oroku Saki is aware of the secret romance and helps keep it under wraps, and Saki, on his compet grind, is jealous of Shen and Yoshi and convinces himself it's because he's also in love with Shen. Now the reason I emphasize them not being brothers in my Splinter video and here is because Saki has a fat closeted crush on Yoshi that he doesn't even fully realize until Shen enters the picture. A few years pass and the Foot clan is trying to get rid of the Oroku clan, either by merging with them into one big ninja clan or by destroying them like they did with the Hamato clan. They opt for the peaceful option, which results in an arranged marriage between Shen and Saki, since they are the sort of heirs to the Foot and Oroku clans respectively. And another clause in this agreement is that Yoshi either needs to be banished or killed, since he is the last remaining member of the Foot clan's sworn enemy. This results in Yoshi going to the United States and studying biochemistry. If you want to hear what Yoshi gets up to in New York City working for TCRI, as well as the Turtles' origins and how he becomes Splinter, you can find that in my Splinter ranking. But now we've reached the point where I gotta explain how Yoshi goes from Saki's beloved best friend to his sworn enemy. By the time he and Shen are married, Saki realizes that he was never in love with Shen and is actually gay as fuck. He and Shen still love each other, but as very platonic best friends. And Shen is so supportive of Saki when he comes to her like, hey girl, I was kind of in love with your boyfriend, this is a little awkward. And they bond in their grief of losing their best friend and love of their life. Also, I think in the same conversation where Saki comes to Shen with his feelings about Yoshi, Shen reveals, hey girl, I'm actually pregnant with Yoshi's child, so hopefully that'll be convincing enough that this arranged marriage is airtight. And very fortunately, that kid takes very strongly after Shen, because Saki and Yoshi look nothing alike. And this kid is Karai, who is raised by her very loving parents. And Shen and Saki keep up this facade of a marriage so strongly that they are the only ones that know that this marriage is purely platonic. I think growing up, Karai maybe picked up on some weird vibes there, but they generally try to sell the image of this family. And it works pretty well because Shen and Saki do genuinely love each other, just not in the way that the marriage would imply. I haven't really hammered out the details timeline-wise, but Shen and Saki also eventually adopt an orphan girl named Himiko. Both of them have a soft spot for this orphan girl because Yoshi was also an orphan, and they raise and love her as their daughter as much as Karai. But as much as Shen and Saki are working to make the unification of their two clans work, tensions have begun to build between the members of the original Foot clan and the Oroku clan, and these tensions eventually result in the murder of Tang Shen. The way I'm considering having this play out is that Oroku Saki's dad, the leader of the Oroku clan originally, is killed off by members of the Foot because they want to assert control and dominance over the entire clan. And obviously the original Oroku clan members, having their leader killed, are pissed and decide to take that out on Tang Shen. Whatever the circumstances, Shen is murdered and Saki is obviously devastated by losing his best friend and wife. With the infighting in the new Foot clan, Saki is honestly at a loss for what to do, especially if his father isn't alive. He doesn't have him or his wife to, lean on for advice. So he's like, you know what, we're gonna go on a little family vacation to New York City. I'm taking my kids with me and I'm going to see Yoshi and get his thoughts because I don't know what to do. but if you recall from my Splinter video, Hamato Yoshi was recently reported dead as the result of a crash. And this happens very shortly before Saki and his daughters arrived in the city. Having lost the two loves of his life one after the other, Saki feels nothing but rage. Directed at the Foot clan for sending Yoshi away, which resulted in his death, and the members of the late Oroku clan for murdering his wife, and so Saki returns to Japan to do a hostile takeover of the Foot clan. He retaliates by killing basically everyone that was directly involved with both deaths. So anyone who had power in the Foot clan that was in charge of putting together the marriage alliance, and thus the clause of Yoshi needing to be sent away or killed, and of course anyone in the Oroku clan that was conspiring against the Foot and involved in Tang Shen's murder. After this massacre and assertion of dominance, Saki takes over the Foot clan and is granted the title of the Shredder, and has now turned to this dominance and power as his purpose in life. Personality-wise, he becomes a lot more like the Shredder from the 2012 series. Very cold, very threatening, someone you absolutely do not want to fuck with. Basically, the one way he is still a good person that differs from 2012 Shredder is that he is still a good father. I mean, as good as a father you can be when you are raising your daughters to be assassins, but he otherwise still loves and cherishes Karai and Himiko. They are all he has left of both Shen and Yoshi, but even outside of the love that he has for their parents, he loves them simply because they are his daughters. And he isn't just projecting his love for Shen and Yoshi onto his kids, he does genuinely love them because they are his kids. And this is kind of the status quo for a bit. You have the Shredder coping with loss by just basically being very violent. A lot of killing people, a lot of assassins for hire in the Foot involved with, you know, political drama, whatever. The specifics of what the Foot clan actually does in Japan is definitely something that I would need to research to be more familiar with the history of ninjas and how that would translate into modern day Japan in a way that makes sense, which is honestly the biggest challenge with this franchise in general, because the idea of the turtles being ninjas in this franchise is definitely something that spawned from the very Americanized view of what ninjas are, as just sort of generic, super sneaky martial arts masters. And with TMNT Genesis, I definitely want to be as respectful of the culture as possible. Eventually we get to the present day, and Shredder keeps thinking about New York and TCRI. Doesn't TCRI work in biochemistry and mutation? Could they possibly help transform the Foot into an even greater threat by making super soldiers? And so he sends his now adult daughter Karai to go investigate TCRI and a potential alliance with them. Also, side note, the Shredder doesn't know that TCRI was Yoshi's op, and if Yoshi hadn't supposedly died in that crash, TCRI absolutely would have killed him themselves. Karai going to New York to investigate TCRI is either right before, during, or after the first episode of TMNT Genesis, as one of the first missions of the Turtles investigating TCRI themselves would be seeing Karai kind of checking out TCRI and negotiating an alliance. I'm leaning towards that happening after the first episode, so that the introduction to TMNT Genesis is more focused on TCRI itself, and potentially the Purple Dragons are going to be in there too. That way it isn't an introduction to TCRI, the Foot, and the Purple Dragons all in one episode. Regardless of the more specific timing, towards the very start of TMNT Genesis, we are seeing Karai and the Foot forming this alliance with TCRI. If we look at TMNT Genesis like a TV show, the Shredder wouldn't come to New York until around the middle of season 1, in a sort of mid-season finale after the Turtles have become an established rival to TCRI and the Foot. This mid-season finale would also probably feature the Shredder learning that the Turtles' Rat Master is Hamato Yoshi. Part of me wants to push this maybe towards the end of season 1, where we have the Shredder versus Turtles dynamic established for half a season, then he learns that the Turtles are being trained by his childhood best friend. Honestly, the more I think about it, I think it would be better to save that Splinter reveal for the finale. But the important thing is mid-season 1 is the introduction of the Shredder into the main narrative. Other than needing to stop the Turtles and their allies from interfering with TCRI and the Foot, a big reason of why Shredder comes to New York is Karai learns that TCRI is being run by aliens, and that these aliens from another dimension are trying to take over the Earth and turn it into an extension of Dimension X like we see in the 2012 series. And Karai is like, hey dad, this shit's kinda crazy, I need you to come here and figure out what the hell we're doing about this. And the Shredder's like, you know what, we'll keep this alliance for now, get what we want out of it, and then if we need to stop these aliens from taking over the Earth or whatever, we'll do that when we get there. And that would be the dynamic up until the reveal of Splinter as Yoshi. Talking through it even more, I do think it's best to save the Splinter Hamato Yoshi reveal for the season 1 finale, but regardless of when it happens, it leads to a very interesting shift, where when Saki learns that Yoshi is alive, he isn't really relieved, because he's become this angry, vengeful bitch in the years that he's been without Shen and Yoshi, and turns the years of anger and grief back onto Yoshi, blaming him for Shen's death, and if he hadn't abandoned them, maybe she would still be alive. It's not logical, but Saki has been running on pure emotion for the last few years, and so all of the anger that's developed from the grief of losing Shen and Yoshi is then pushed back onto Yoshi. Saki is feeling a swirl of conflicting emotions, regrets, and general frustrations, and the easiest way for him to cope with that is just to write off Splinter as another enemy. Especially with the turtles already being an established enemy to the foot, it's just so much easier for Saki to completely write off any love he had for Yoshi in the past. And this is the point where the Shredder is no longer planning to turn on TCRI after he gets what he needs for the foot, because he's so distraught by learning that Yoshi's alive that he's like, you know what, hell yeah, we're conquering the Earth now. Karai's continuing to follow her dad's wishes, and when the foot comes to New York in that mid-season finale, so does Himiko, and she is going to become Lotus Blossom. She doesn't have a romance with Leo, but does otherwise have a similar relationship with them, in the way Lotus in the 1987 series, as well as 2003 and 2012 Karai are sort of convinced by Leo to kind of start becoming a better person, much more effectively than in 2003 in particular. But this allows Karai to maintain the antagonistic role that I prefer for her, and we get to have a sort of redemption for Karai through Himiko. And I just wanted to have Lotus in this universe, because Lotus is very similar to Karai, but they are different characters, and so I wanted to explore that while also playing with some interesting narratives associated with Karai. And personality-wise, I want Himiko to kind of feel like Ty Lee from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Kind of a bubbly and whimsical personality, but will also beat the shit out of you. I don't know, that just seems fun. When Shredder fully commits to the alliance with TCRI, they give him this sick new armor that I wanted to look very similar to Utrom Shredder for specific reasons that I'll get into later, but this is where Krang enters the picture. Regardless of when the Yoshi Splinter reveal happens, Krang will more deliberately enter the picture and form that personal alliance with the Shredder in the mid-season finale, and that relationship becomes even stronger when Shredder fully commits to his role in TCRI. I am planning to do a Krang Utrom ranking at some point, which is going to be a really weird one, because it's going to be comparing species to individual characters in a way that's going to be kind of strange, and I gotta figure out how exactly I am going to approach that. In any case, I will expand more on Krang and the Utrom in particular in that video. But for now, Krang is kind of like Prince Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where his father Shirel is the leader of the Utrom Empire. And Krang is looked down upon by his father and given the task of conquering Earth to sort of reclaim his honor like Zuko. It's not really an honor thing in the way Zuko is trying to capture the Avatar to reclaim his honor, but Krang being respected by his father and having a place in his empire. Krang is the one that is running TCRI because of this, and now with the Shredder as a permanent part of the TCRI operation, he and Krang have a dynamic very similar to the 1987 series. As far as tone goes, because TMNT Genesis is generally more serious, it isn't going to be nearly as silly or cartoonish like it is in the 1987 series, but I do really want to have that same banter where they kind of hate each other, and they're constantly bickering and getting on each other's nerves, but the more time they spend together, the more they kind of start appreciating one another, in a way that neither of them would admit. But they do genuinely start caring for each other. And that care eventually leads them to start questioning why they're trying to take over the world. In Shredder's case, he's coping with his trauma and loss by conquering, but there is still at least a small part of him that wants to make peace with Yoshi, because he still genuinely loves and cares about him as much as he doesn't want to. And in Krang's case, it's his massive fucking daddy issues with Emperor Shirel. And this is where things get juicy. Because while Krang and Shredder are starting to have these doubts and lose steam with the progress that TCRI is making, Big Daddy Emperor Shirel catches wind of the way that TCRI isn't working as well as it should, and decides to come to Earth himself to oversee the project. With his pure evil dad coming to Earth, Krang folds and just succumbs to his father's whims. And this makes the relationship that was blooming between Krang and Shredder very icy. I'm not sure of the exact circumstances in which Saki would do this, but he starts looking for small ways to start sabotaging TCRI, while still playing the part of the enemy of the turtles. There are a few reasons why Shredder doesn't just up and leave TCRI, one of them being he knows that being on the inside gives him an advantage, and so he can gather intel so that he and the Foot can eventually turn against TCRI like they initially planned. But getting that advantage is really important because whenever the Foot does turn on TCRI, it's going to be a bloody mess. On top of this, although Saki has convinced himself that he hates Krang for being a pushover-ass bitch, he has genuinely grown to care a lot for Krang and subconsciously doesn't want to abandon him. I don't have any plans to give Saki the daddy issues on the level of Krang and Shirel, but I think it could be neat to add a layer of relatability with Saki growing up as the sort of heir to the Oroku clan, and this is also why he wouldn't be as shaken by his father's murder as he was Shen's, and of course Yoshi's death. Now before Shredder can follow through on definitively betraying TCRI, Shirel gets fed up with the Shredder and the Foot just being in their way, and noticing that Krang has a little bit of a soft spot for Saki, Shirel is like, you know what? I have the perfect way to put my son in his place. So you know how Shredder's sick new armor was created by TCRI? Yeah, so Shredder is able to take control of that suit in order to lock Saki in place, and force himself down Saki's throat in order to take complete control of his body. As you do. The Utrom having this power, like in the IDW comics, was something I absolutely wanted to incorporate into TMNT Genesis, because I think it is so fucking sick in both ways you can interpret that word. And now we enter the Utrom Shredder era, where Saki's body has become Shredder's new suit. If people aren't as excited about this concept as I am, whatever, but I think it is the single thing in my AU that I'm the most proud and excited about. Because like I mentioned earlier, finding a way to have Shredder be a good, potentially redeemable person at his core, while also getting a Shredder that is genuinely pure evil, was a huge challenge. And so bringing in Shredder to be Utrom Shredder was the perfect solution to this, and perfectly fits the tone that I'm trying to capture with TMNT Genesis. As far as where the Shredder goes from here, Utrom Shredder would be around for a while, somewhere between half and a full season, before he is eventually defeated. I'm still hammering out the details because this is the thing furthest into the story that I've thought about, but the general idea is that in order to save Saki and defeat his father, Krang needs to rip Shredder out of Saki's abdomen, and then kill him once he is in that vulnerable state. This would be happening while TCRI is definitively being taken down by the Turtles and their allies, however that ends up playing out, and while they're off doing all that, because of the way that Shredder had merged with Saki's body, it would be impossible for Saki to survive without an Utrom body inhabiting that same space. Krang takes Saki's unconscious body out of there by filling the spot that Shredder just vacated in Saki's abdomen, and controlling his body in the same way to walk the two of them out of there. In the same season that Utrom Shredder is the main antagonist, I would want to introduce Bishop and the EPF, who I haven't planned anything more specific for, but the way they exist in my head right now is pretty identical to the 2003 series, including the way Bishop keeps cloning new bodies for himself in order to live forever, and so Krang, controlling Saki, breaks into wherever Bishop's cloning consciousness transfer lab exists, and transfers his own consciousness from his Utrom body into one of the Bishop clones, which leaves Saki with Krang's old body still in his abdomen, keeping him alive. And with an Utrom body keeping him alive but no Utrom consciousness taking control of him, when Saki comes to, he is completely alive and in control of his own body as he was before. Except now, of course, he has Krang's old body in his abdomen, keeping him alive. And Krang is now a Bishop clone. I haven't designed Bishop yet, but Krang in this form would look different from Bishop, by one of them either having longer hair or a beard or something. That's something I'll play with later. But yeah, after Saki recovers from Krang saving him, I'm not really sure where I want them to go from there. Maybe they'll take a vacation or something after the bullshit they had to endure together, I don't know. Regardless of what they do or where they are for the rest of TMNT Genesis, I would want to bring them back for this sort of series finale, in which the final antagonist would probably be Bishop and the EPF, and Krang and Saki would become allies to the Turtles to help stop whatever that final threat is. Also, I haven't explicitly stated this yet, but Krang and Saki are in love, obviously, and they get to have a happy ending together because I think that's fun and cute. My voice claim for the Shredder in TMNT Genesis is gonna be Eric Bauza. I think his range from Tiger Claw in TMNT 2012 to Splinter in Rise of the TMNT will lend itself very well to the more nuanced Shredder I'm trying to portray.
This is the Foot Clan you promised me? I must say, Master Shredder, I am disappointed. Now I have to come up with a plan to get us out of your mess?
I'll come up with a plan.
Oh, no. I'll come up with a plan.
Also, Shredder in Rise of the TMNT was voiced by 2012 Splinter's voice actor, and so I think it would be fun to have Genesis Shredder voiced by Rise Splinter. But yeah, that's the story of Oroku Saki in TMNT Genesis. He's been my favorite character to develop because of the unique challenge of combining contrasting interpretations of the Shredder, and he's absolutely the character I've been the most selfish with, where the target audience for his character is me and me alone, and I'm just doing what I want to see happen with the Shredder as opposed to what other people might want, in particular with his relationship with Krang, because like I said in my Shredder ranking, Shredder and Krang in the 1987 series are my favorite ship in all media, and I could not live with myself if I did not put that in TMNT Genesis. I really hope y'all like the approach I took to Shredder despite him being catered to my specific preferences, because I am so very proud of him. Like I mentioned in my Shredder ranking, the next ranking video will be either Michelangelo or Raphael, and I will post a poll at some point to decide who I will rank first. The Lego Technodrome my friend and I designed is still up on LEGO Ideas, so please go support that if you haven't already. It is completely free to do. As always, the link is in the description. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like and hype if you did. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see y'all next time.